Tonight, the year is in the mid-1750s. The Atlantic Ocean rests in the dark, its waves steady and endless, carrying the smell of salt and pine toward the shore of North America. Along that shore stretch 13 colonies, scattered but connected, each with its own rhythm of life. At first glance, they seem calm, steady, and eternal, as if nothing could disturb the quiet order of their days. Yet under that calm lies the beginning of a story that will grow louder in the years ahead. For now, the continent sleeps, and its people work and pray, farm and trade, unaware how history is about to shift. In New England, towns gather close to the rocky coast. Wooden houses with tall chimneys sit in neat rows. Meeting houses rise at the center, their bells ready to call neighbors to worship or town business. The soil is thin and the winter is long, so families depend on fishing, shipbuilding, and trade. Harbors smell of tar, salt, and oak where the ships are built plank by plank. The people here are known for their stern faith and their steady hands, each generation teaching the next how to endure the hard land with patience. In the evenings, candlelight flickers on plain walls, and the streets fall silent except for the creak of snow under boots. Further south, in the middle colonies, life feels softer. The soil is richer, the rivers wide and calm. Fields of wheat sway gently, giving this region the name of the breadbasket. Markets in towns like Philadelphia and New York are alive with many voices: English, Dutch, German, Swedish. Farmers bring butter, flour, and cider to sell, while merchants ship goods across the sea. These colonies are a blend of cultures, a mix of ideas and faiths. In taverns, travelers talk of politics and trade, while in the countryside, families gather under large barns for harvest feasts. The nights here are quiet, filled with the sound of crickets and the steady hum of mills turning in the streams. Still further south, the land grows warmer. Plantations stretch wide along rivers in Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia. Tobacco, rice, and indigo grow in long green rows, tended by enslaved people whose lives are bound by chains. The wealth of this region rests on their unending labor, a truth often spoken only in whispers. Great houses stand at the center of these estates, lit by lanterns and cooled by wide porches. Gentle breezes carry the scent of magnolia, and at night the cicadas sing. Yet behind the calm lies deep inequality, a division that will one day weigh heavy on the nation still unborn. The colonies are not all the same. Their customs, economies, and beliefs differ, but they share certain patterns. Families are large, children many. Work begins at dawn and ends only when daylight fades. Most houses are simple, with wooden floors and stone fireplaces. Education varies. Formal schools in New England, tutors in the South, and apprenticeships in towns. But all know that reading, faith, and labor are the marks of a good life. Sundays are quiet days, with church bells marking the rhythm of hours. Neighbors greet each other with nods, and long sermons remind them of order and duty. In the stillness of the evening, smoke rises in thin lines from chimneys, fading into the sky. Above all, the colonies are tied to Britain. Ships arrive from London and Bristol with cloth, tea, books, and fine china. In return, American ships carry timber, furs, fish, and grain. The red flag of empire flutters in harbors, and portraits of King George II hang in meeting halls. Many colonists think of themselves as loyal subjects, proud to belong to the greatest power in the world. The empire's reach seems endless, stretching from the Caribbean to India, from Africa to Canada. When news arrives across the ocean, it is read aloud in taverns and posted in town squares, bringing the far-off world into the lives of farmers and sailors. In the 1750s, a great conflict, later called the 7 Years' War, spreads across continents. Britain and France, old rivals, fight for territory and trade. North America becomes one of the main stages. French forts rise along the rivers of the Ohio Valley, while British settlers push westward, seeking new land. Skirmishes break out, and indigenous nations are caught between empires, making choices to protect their people. In quiet villages, mothers worry as young men march off to serve with colonial militias, their muskets on their shoulders. Yet even with the shadow of war, most families continue their lives, planting in spring, harvesting in fall, gathering around hearths in winter. When the war ends in 1763, Britain stands victorious. France surrenders Canada, and the map of North America changes. Colonists cheer the victory, proud of their place within the empire, but the war has cost Britain dearly. The empire is deep in debt, and its leaders look across the Atlantic to its colony for support. In that moment, the seeds of future conflict are planted, though the colonists do not yet see them clearly. For now, they believe peace has returned and life can resume as before. Ships continue to arrive, markets stay busy, and families hope for steady years ahead. Still, something subtle begins to shift. The war has shown colonists that they can fight alongside Britain, but also that they can depend on themselves. Colonial officers gain experience. Ordinary farmers learn discipline in camps. Roads are cut through forests, and supplies are moved over great distances. These lessons of war will not be forgotten. In taverns and churches, conversations grow slightly bolder. Neighbors begin to ask why decisions that affect their lives are made an ocean away. It is not yet rebellion, not even close, but it is a quiet awareness, a stirring under the surface of calm. The continent, in these years, is wide and full of contrasts. Forests stretch endless beyond the mountains. Rivers wind patiently, carrying canoes and rafts. Deer move silently through thickets. Wolves howl in distant hills. Stars blanket the sky each night, brighter than in any city. To the west lie lands not yet settled by Europeans, where indigenous nations carry on ancient traditions, hunting, farming, and telling stories by firelight. Their lives, too, will be drawn into the tides of empire, though tonight they rest in their own rhythms, beneath the same moon. For now, the colonies seem steady. Farms are planted, ships sail, bells ring. Children play in fields, women spin wool, men gather at taverns. The air is filled with the scent of bread, smoke, and hay. Life feels ordinary, almost eternal. But history is never still for long. The quiet continent, lying between forest and sea, is about to awaken. In the calm before the storm, the people of America live their days unaware that within a generation, they will no longer call themselves subjects of a king. They will call themselves something new. Tonight, as we drift into this story, let the harbor waters remain calm. Let the fields rest, the bells fall silent, and the candles burn low. The continent sleeps, waiting for dawn. And in that dawn, change will come. The year is 1763. The war with France is over, and the colonies breathe easier. Farmers return to their fields, sailors to their ships, families to their ordinary routines. Yet in London, leaders look at the empire's balance sheet and see heavy debt. The victory has been costly. To them, it seems only natural that the colonies, who benefited from the triumph, should share in the expense. To the colonists, however, the years ahead will feel like a slow tightening of ropes, each new policy pulling them closer to unrest. The first rope comes in the shape of a line, drawn not on the ground but on a map. It is the proclamation line of 1763. Britain declares that colonists may not settle west of the Appalachian Mountains. The intention is to prevent conflict with indigenous nations who live beyond, and to stabilize the frontier after years of war. But to many colonists, the line feels like a barrier against their hopes. Land is wealth, and wealth is opportunity. Families who dreamed of new farms in the valleys beyond now face disappointment. For a while, they grumble quietly, still loyal but uneasy. 2 years later, another measure arrives. The Sugar Act of 1764 places duties on sugar, molasses, and other goods. It is not the first tax ever, but it comes with stricter enforcement and new courts to try smugglers. Merchants in Boston and Newport feel the sting most sharply, for trade is their lifeblood. Ordinary families notice less at first, but they hear the complaints in taverns, in marketplaces, and from ministers who speak of liberty. The word rights begins to move from books into conversations. Then, in 1765, The Stamp Act arrives. This law requires official stamps on newspapers, legal documents, even playing cards. It touches many lives at once: lawyers, printers, tavern keepers, sailors. For the first time, ordinary people in towns and villages feel the weight of London's decision in their own hands, as they pass coins for a stamped sheet or hear about rising costs. The protests are sharp, but in our quiet telling, they sound like the steady beat of a drum, growing louder with each step. Crowds gather, petitions circulate, and a phrase takes shape: no taxation without representation. It means, simply, that colonists believe laws should not be made for them without their voice in Parliament. The slogan will echo through the years ahead, like a low bell in the distance. The Stamp Act stirs more than protests. It inspires cooperation. From New England to the Carolinas, delegates meet in what is called the Stamp Act Congress. They share concerns, exchange ideas, and discover that despite differences of region and custom, they have much in common. When Britain repeals the act in 1766, colonists cheer. Bells ring, bonfires glow, and many believe the trouble is past. But the relief is brief. Britain declares, in the Declaratory Act, that it has the right to legislate for the colonies in all cases whatsoever. The words are read quietly, but they plan unease. What cases will follow? In 1767, new duties arrive under the Townshend Acts: taxes on glass, paint, paper, and tea. Once again, households feel the effect. Housewives choose whether to buy taxed imports or to spin homespun cloth. Merchants debate boycotts, refusing to import British goods. In quiet kitchens, families agree to drink less tea, to wear simpler clothes, to use local substitutes. These choices are small, almost invisible, but together they become acts of resistance. Children see their parents avoid taxed items and learn that loyalty now comes with conditions. In response to unrest, Britain sends more troops to Boston in 1768. Red-coated soldiers march through narrow streets, stand guard customs houses, and mingle uneasily with townsfolk. The city feels tense, like a room too crowded to breathe. On a cold March night in 1770, an argument flares between a soldier and a crowd. Snowballs fly, shouts echo, muskets discharge. When smoke clears, 5 colonists lie dead in the snow. It will be called the Boston Massacre. Pamphlets spread the story far and wide, painting it as a symbol of oppression. Yet even in this retelling, the event is not a shout but a heavy silence, the kind that settles after sudden violence. For a few years, calm seems possible again. Most of the Townshend duties are repealed, but the tax on tea remains. London wishes to assert its authority, even in a single cup. In 1773, the Tea Act attempts to rescue the struggling East India Company by allowing it to sell tea cheaply, undercutting smugglers. But colonists see it not as a bargain, but as a trick. Cheap tea that still carries a tax. In December that year, a group of men in Boston disguised themselves as Mohawk Indians, board ships, and quietly tipped chests of tea into the harbor. The sea grows dark with the leaves. It is called the Boston Tea Party. The act is dramatic, yet in our gentle telling, it is like ripples spreading on water, small at first, then reaching far. Britain's response is firm. In 1774, Parliament passes the Coercive Acts, which the colonists call the Intolerable Acts. Boston's harbor is closed until the tea is repaid. Town meetings are restricted. Officials gain new powers. Soldiers may be quartered in private homes. These measures are meant to bring order, but they create the opposite. Other colonies, watching Boston suffer, send aid and sympathy. In taverns and churches, people whisper that what happens in one colony may happen in all. Unity begins to grow, quiet but steady, like roots beneath the soil. At the same time, committees of correspondence link towns and colonies. Riders carry letters along dark roads, passing news of protests, boycotts, and debates. Information moves faster than before, binding scattered settlements into something more like a single community. Across the continent, colonists begin to feel that their struggles are shared. The idea of America takes its first breaths in these exchanges, though it is still fragile and faint. By 1774, the storm is gathering. Ordinary life continues. Fields are plowed, children taught, sermons preached. But in the background, discontent grows. Farmers who once thought little of Parliament now wonder about its reach. Merchants weigh their losses against their loyalty. Families prepare for shortages, unsure of what will come. The continent is not yet in rebellion, but the calm is thinning. Tension hums in the air like the faint vibration of a string, ready to be struck. Tonight, as we pause at the end of this chapter, imagine the harbor of Boston. The water is still, but beneath the surface lies a memory of tea leaves sinking, darkening the tide. The streets are quiet, yet in their silence lingers the echo of musket shots from that snowy night. The colonies are restless, bound still to Britain, yet already straining at the ties. The storm has not yet broken, but the first winds are moving. In the years ahead, the continent will no longer sleep as it once did. The year is 1775. Winter has passed, and early spring covers New England with soft green. Birds return to the trees, rivers run faster with melted snow, and fields wait to be planted once more. Yet beneath this calm, tension lies thick. For months, the colonies have argued with Britain, but now words are about to turn into action. Quietly, step by step, the first sparks of war begin to glow. On a cool April night, riders move across the countryside. Hooves strike the dirt roads in steady rhythm, echoing through the dark. Lanterns glimmer in farmhouse windows as men wake from sleep to hear urgent knocks at their doors. The riders, Paul Revere, William Dawes, Samuel Prescott, carry the same message. British regulars are on the move. Columns of red-coated soldiers have left Boston, marching toward Concord to seize colonial supplies stored there. The night is hushed except for the sound of galloping horses and the whispered words. The regulars are coming. Villages stir. Church bells ring an alarm, carrying far across the still night. Drums beat softly in barns, calling men from their homes. Muskets are lifted from above fireplaces. Powder horns are filled, and shot pouches tied at the waist. Mothers hand cloaks to sons. Wives press lanterns into husband hands. The militia, ordinary farmers and tradesmen, gathers on village greens, their breath visible in the cold air. They are not soldiers in polished lines, but neighbors bound together by duty. As dawn approaches, the sky pales from black to deep blue. In Lexington, 70 militiamen stand on the green, their boots sinking into the damp grass. They face a column of hundreds of British soldiers, their bayonets gleaming in the dim light. For a long moment, both sides hold still. Birds sing in the hedges, unaware of history balanced on a breath. Then, in the half-light of morning, a shot cracks the silence. No one knows who fired it. The sound is sharp, sudden, and echoes against the houses. Confusion erupts. The British fire a volley. The militia scatter. When the smoke clears, 8 colonists lie dead and more are wounded. The survivors retreat, shaken, but the spark has been struck. The soldiers march on toward Concord. Along the road, more militia gather, hidden behind stone walls and hedgerows. At Concord's North Bridge, smoke rises where supplies have been burned. Militia companies advance, their drums steady, their steps deliberate. Shots are exchanged, and the red-coated soldiers pull back. For the first time, British regulars retreat before colonial militia. The air smells of gunpowder. The river flows quietly beside them, and the echo of musket fire drifts across the hills. What follows is not a single battle, but a running fight. As the British march back toward Boston, mile after mile, militia pour in from nearby towns. They line the roads, fire from windows and fields, and melt away again. The march becomes long and punishing. Dust rises around the soldiers, their uniforms stained with sweat and smoke. By nightfall, the British finally reach safety, but the cost is heavy. Scores are killed or wounded, and the colonists realize they have stood against the Empire's army and endured. News spreads quickly. carried by riders over rough roads, printed in hurried broadsheets and spoken in taverns. Across the colonies, people hear of Lexington and Concord. The events are framed not as rebellion, but as defense. Neighbors standing on their own ground, defending their homes, their rights, their future. The phrase, "the shot heard round the world," will be remembered later, but at the time it feels more like a trembling awakening, a continent stirring into movement. Boston soon becomes the focus of both armies. Militia from Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island gather around the city, creating a ring of men determined to keep the British contained. The siege of Boston begins quiet but steady, with camps forming in the fields and hills. Tense, the landscape. Smoke from campfires drifts upward, and sentries pace slowly at night. Farmers and fishermen now stand as soldiers, learning discipline by necessity. The sound of axes felling trees and spades digging trenches replaces the quiet of the countryside. As the weeks pass, the colonies realize they must coordinate. In Philadelphia, delegates gather again in the Continental Congress. They debate in long sessions, their words measured but urgent. By June, they appoint a commander for the new Continental Army, George Washington of Virginia. Tall, composed, and steady, Washington accepts the role with humility. He wears his uniform of blue and buff, a symbol of unity beyond one colony. His presence gives a movement direction, a single figure to lead a scattered force. Yet even here, the tone remains cautious. Few openly speak of full independence. Many still hope for reconciliation with Britain, imagining a future where grievances are heard and rights respected. But the reality on the ground, musket smoke over Lexington, blood on Concord Bridge, British retreat along dusty roads, tells another story. The ties are fraying, faster than anyone can mend them. Through the summer, the lines around Boston hold. Families nearby live with the constant tension of armies at their doors. Fields are left unplanted, barns converted to storehouses, and churches used as meeting halls. The ordinary life of New England is interrupted, yet beneath the disruption lies determination. The colonists know the road ahead will be long, but they have taken the first step, and there is no turning back. Imagine it now, as the day fades into evening. The village green at Lexington lies quiet, the grass once again damp with dew. The bridge at Concord spans a river, carrying only the sound of flowing water. Along the road back to Boston, stones and fields bear silent witness to the footsteps of soldiers and farmers alike. What began as whispers and protests has become open conflict. The colonies, once restless but uncertain, now face the dawn of war. Tonight, let us pause at that dawn. Picture the riders moving through the dark, their lanterns swinging. Picture the farmers standing in rows at first light, uncertain but unyielding. Picture the retreating column, weary but chaste, and the calm resolve of men who now call themselves not only subjects of a king, but defenders of their land. The first sparks are lit, and the fire will spread. But for now, the continent rests, waiting for what comes next. The spring of 1775 ends with Boston under siege. After the first sparks at Lexington and Concord, colonial militia flood the countryside, closing in around the city. From the harbor, British ships sit at anchor, their masts rising like a forest of spars. From the land, thousands of farmers, fishermen, and tradesmen take their posts, forming a ring of earthworks and watchfires. The city is trapped between sea and land, quiet in appearance but tense in spirit. The siege of Boston is not swift. It is long, patient, and uncertain. Life in the camps is marked by endurance. Men sleep in tents or crude huts, waking to drill at dawn. Axes ring as trees are cut to build fortifications. Shovels scrape the earth as trenches and redoubts rise on the hills. The air smells of pine, smoke, and fresh soil. Supplies are scarce, powder, food, clothing, and yet the resolve holds. The colonists, untrained and unevenly equipped, are learning slowly by doing. Washington has not yet arrived, but already discipline begins to take shape. Within the city, British troops endure their own hardships. Crowded into Boston's narrow streets, They depend on the Royal Navy for provisions. Tensions with townsfolk simmer. Soldiers drill on the commons, their red coats bright against the green. Officers meet in taverns, planning next steps, their eyes fixed on the heights surrounding the harbor. Whoever controls those hills controls the city. In June, the British decide to act. They plan to seize the high ground of Charlestown, across the river from Boston. If the rebels fortify those heights, the city itself will be in danger. Word of the plan leaks, and colonial leaders resolve to move first. On the night of June 16th, 1775, men march quietly toward Breed's Hill, mistaken by some as Bunker Hill, and begin to dig under the cover of darkness. Picks strike earth, shovels bite into soil, and the shape of a fort rises from the ground. By morning, a square redoubt stands on the hilltop, its walls of freshly turned earth. British sentries on ships in the harbor awake to see it and sound the alarm. The next day, June 17th, the assault begins. British ships open fire, their cannonballs arching toward the hill. Charlestown burns as flames sweep through wooden houses. On the slopes above, colonial militia wait. Powder is scarce, so officers instruct, don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes. It is not bravado but necessity, a reminder to save every shot. The men lie low behind earthen walls, musket steady, hearts beating slow and hard. Red-coated soldiers march uphill in neat lines, bayonets gleaming. The summer air is heavy, the climb steep. From behind the redoubt, colonists watch in silence until the enemy draws close. Then a sudden volley cracks the air. Smoke fills the sky. The first British line falls back, broken by the withering fire. Drums beat, officers shout, and the soldiers regroup. Again they climb, and again they are thrown back. The hill becomes a place of smoke, sweat, and heat, the cries of men mingling with the roar of muskets. At last, a third assault comes. By now, the colonists' powder is nearly gone. When the British press close, the defenders resort to stones, fists, even the butts of muskets. The redoubt is overrun. The militia retreat across the hill, step by step, carrying their wounded, refusing to collapse into panic. The British take the ground, but the price is staggering. Hundreds dead and wounded, far more than the colonists have lost. For a hill of earth, they have paid dearly. From a distance, smoke drifts across the harbor. The guns fall silent, leaving only the cries of the wounded and the crackle of fire in the ruined town below. For the colonists, though they retreat, it is a moral victory. They have stood against the Empire's best troops, inflicted heavy losses, and shown that they can endure. Word spreads through the camps and beyond. The militia are no longer merely farmers with muskets. They are becoming an army. In July, George Washington arrives. Riding into Cambridge, he takes command of the gathered forces. Tall and steady, he walks among the tents, observing the men, the makeshift weapons, the short supplies. With calm determination, he begins the slow work of turning volunteers into soldiers. Drills become regular, discipline more strict. He brings patience and order, traits as necessary as courage. The siege of Boston continues month after month, a test of endurance more than a clash of arms. Through the autumn and winter, the standoff holds. The British remain trapped in Boston. The colonists hold the surrounding hills. Both sides wait, watching. It is a quiet war, marked by skirmishes, foraging raids, and the endless work of fortification. Snow covers the tents, fires burn low, and sentries pace in silence under frozen stars. The turning point comes in early 1776. Colonel Henry Knox, a bookseller turned officer, leads a remarkable effort. The transport heavy cannon from Fort Ticonderoga in New York, dragged across snow and ice for hundreds of miles. Oxen strain, sledges creak, and slowly the guns arrive at the siege lines. In March, Washington orders them placed on Dorchester Heights, overlooking the harbor. When dawn breaks, the British awake to see guns staring down upon them from high ground. They cannot assault without grave loss. Faced with this new threat, The British commanders decide to withdraw. In March 1776, their fleet carries soldiers and Loyalist families away to Halifax, leaving Boston in colonial hands. Bells ring, cannons fire and salute, and relief sweeps the countryside. The siege is over. A city long held in tension now breathes free. The lessons of Boston are clear. The colonists learn that patience can wear down even the strongest foe. They learn the value of earthworks, of steady lines, of quiet endurance through long months. And they learn to look to Washington as a leader, not for glory, but for steadiness. The war is still young, but already its pattern emerges. Hardship, sacrifice, and the slow growth of an army from raw beginnings. Tonight, imagine the hills above the harbor. Picture the men digging by lantern light, shovels striking earth in silence. Picture the red lines climbing the slope, breaking and reforming under fire. Picture the smoke drifting over Boston and the long winter nights of waiting. Out of patience and endurance, a new force has been born. The city is free, but the struggle is only beginning. The year is 1776. Boston is free, yet the war is far from over. British ships regroup in the harbors of Canada and New York, preparing for fresh campaigns. The colonies hold together by threads of cooperation, their armies still learning, their people still uncertain. For many, the question remains, are they resisting Parliament's unfair taxes, or are they seeking something larger? That summer, the answer begins to take shape. In Philadelphia, the Continental Congress gathers once more. Delegates ride from north and south, their carriages rolling along dusty roads, their letters of authority carried in saddlebags. They meet in a large brick building on Chestnut Street, the Pennsylvania State House, later called Independence Hall. The room is warm with June heat. Windows are propped open, and flies drift lazily through the air. Men wipe their brows with handkerchiefs as they debate. Their voices are serious, their words careful, for what they decide may change not only the colonies but the world. For months, petitions have been sent to the king, asking for redress. Each was answered with silence or rejection. British troops had fired at Lexington, stormed Bunker Hill, and occupied towns. Ships had bombarded harbors. The possibility of reconciliation faded with each letter ignored. Delegates now ask openly, if Britain treats the colonies as enemies, are they not already separate in spirit? Should they not declare openly what events have already made true? On June 11th, a committee is appointed to draft a declaration. 5 men are chosen: Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, John Adams of Massachusetts, Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania, Roger Sherman of Connecticut, and Robert Livingston of New York. They gather in quiet rooms, quills scratching on parchment, as they shape words meant to speak for millions. Jefferson, the youngest, takes the lead in writing, his handwriting looping carefully across the page. The ideas they shape are not entirely new. They draw on English traditions, Enlightenment philosophy, colonial charters, and sermons heard in meeting houses. But they give the ideas a new voice, one clear, direct, and universal. They speak of natural rights, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed with rights no government may justly take away. They speak of the purpose of government, not to rule for its own power, but to secure those rights. And they speak of the right of a people, when government becomes destructive of those ends, to alter or abolish it, and to create new guards for their safety and happiness. These phrases do not thunder in our telling. They flow like calm waters, simple and steady. They are promises written in ink, meant for future generations as much as for the present. The delegates argue over details, phrases adjusted, sections revised. Some passages are softened to maintain fragile unity. Others removed to preserve agreement among regions. But the core remains, a statement that the colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. On July 2nd, the Congress votes for independence. 2 days later, on July 4th, the final text of the Declaration is approved. Outside, bells toll, and the evening's bonfires burn. Yet at the moment itself, the scene is almost ordinary. A paper is signed, folded, and carried to printer. In shops and taverns, in churches and on courthouse steps, the words soon appear in broadside form, read aloud to gather crowds. Men remove their hats. Women hold their children close. Listeners fall silent as they hear the opening lines. The paper becomes a promise, and the promise becomes a people's claim. Across the colonies, the effect is electric. In New York, soldiers tear down a statue of King George and melt it into musket balls. In Virginia, ministers preach of liberty. In frontier cabins, farmers pin the Declaration to walls beside family Bibles. Some cheer with joy, others listen with worry, but all know that a line has been crossed. There is no turning back. Beyond the colonies, the world also takes notice. In London, the Declaration is read with anger, seen as open rebellion. In France, ministers read it with interest, weighing whether this new nation might serve as a counterbalance to Britain's power. In the Caribbean, enslaved people hear whispers of equality and wonder if such promises will ever reach them. Across oceans and continents, the words ripple outward, their meaning stretching far beyond the room where they were first signed. Yet in that summer of 1776, the future is uncertain. The colonies declare themselves free, but the British Army is still strong, its fleet vast. Independence has been claimed, but it must now be defended. Washington prepares his army near New York, aware that British reinforcements gather offshore. Farmers still plow fields, mothers still cook meals, children still play in yards. But in every heart lies the awareness that life has changed. They are no longer subjects of a king. They are citizens of something new, fragile, untested, but alive. The Declaration is not only a political act, but a moment of imagination. It asks ordinary people to see themselves not as colonists tied to distant London, but as part of a single people called Americans. That shift is as powerful as any musket volley, for it redefines identity. From now on, even if the war drags long, even if hardship deepens, there will remain a vision of what they are fighting for. Not simply lighter taxes or fairer trade, but the right to self-rule and the dignity of free choice. Tonight, let us picture that paper on a wooden table in a warm July room. The ink still glistens, the quill rests beside it, and the windows stand open to the summer air. Outside, bells ring faintly. Carriages roll past, and children chase one another in the dusty streets. The city is alive, ordinary, unaware that history has just taken a new turn. The world has been told that a new nation is rising, and though it is only words on a page for now, those words will echo for centuries. The continent, once quiet and unsure, has spoken aloud. The colonies have declared themselves free. And though the storms of battle lie ahead, the promise has been made. The summer of 1776 turns heavy. The Declaration has been read in town squares. Bells have rung and bonfires have burned, but joy is followed quickly by worry. For Britain is not finished. Across the Atlantic, the empire gathers its strength. Regiments are shipped, cannon loaded, sails unfurled. And soon, New York becomes the stage on which that power arrives. In late June, sails begin to appear on the horizon. First a few, then dozens and hundreds. The harbor fills with the largest fleet ever seen in American waters. Tall ships stretch as far as the eye can see, their masts like a forest of wood and canvas. At anchor wait more than 30,000 soldiers and sailors, British regulars and German auxiliaries, trained and disciplined. Against them, Washington commands an army of volunteers, perhaps half the size, many untested in battle. The city of New York lies between rivers, the East River and Hudson, and looks outward to the bay. It is a place of narrow streets, wooden houses, and scattered farms. Washington knows it is difficult to defend, but too important to abandon. From Brooklyn Heights to Harlem, his men build trenches, erect palisades, and drag cannon into place. By day, they labor under the hot sun. By night, they sleep on straw and dirt. Food is short, supplies scarce, discipline still uneven. Yet there is resolve, born of the knowledge that the eyes of the world rest on them. In August, the storm breaks. The British land troops on Long Island, south of the American lines. At dawn on August 27th, columns move quietly through wooded hills. Washington's men wait in fortified positions, unaware that flanking movements are already unfolding. By midday, the British trap the Americans between lines, pushing them back. The battle is sharp, the loss is heavy. Many fall, others surrender, and some attempt to escape across fields and swamps. By night, the American army is cornered, the East River at its back, the enemy in front. It seems the cause may end in that moment, but nature intervenes. A heavy fog settles on the river, thick and low, muffling sound and hiding shapes. Through the night of August 29th, Washington orders a retreat. Boats ferry men across the East River in silence. Oars dip softly, water ripples, and the fog covers all. By dawn, thousands are crossed, and the British awake to find empty trenches. The army, though bruised, is saved. The war continues because of that narrow escape. September brings more trials. The British press forward, landing again on Manhattan. Washington withdraws northward, fighting delaying actions. At Harlem Heights, on September 16th, a skirmish turns into a moment of encouragement. American troops counterattack with steadiness, driving the enemy back. Cheers echo through the ranks. It is not a great victory, but it restores some confidence. For soldiers who have known retreat and loss, the knowledge that they can stand and strike back matters deeply. Still, the tide remains against them. By autumn, the British occupy New York City. Their banners fly above forts and churches. Fires sweep parts of the town, leaving blackened ruins. Washington pulls his forces north, then west across the Hudson River into New Jersey. The pursuit is relentless. Leaves turn red and gold, then fall, covering the roads in a carpet that muffles footsteps. Cold winds arrive. Each mile feels heavier than the last. Desertion rises, enlistments expire, and hopes sink with the season. The retreat across New Jersey is grim. The army dwindles to a few thousand men, hungry, weary, their clothes torn, their shoes worn thin. Yet Washington rides among them, calm and unshaken. He speaks little, but his presence steadies. Rivers are crossed, first the Hudson, then the Delaware, always with the enemy pressing close behind. Each crossing is a gamble. Boats gathered in haste, soldiers ferried under threat, supplies barely carried over. Yet again and again, the army escapes, surviving by a thread. By December, the situation is dire. Congress flees Philadelphia, carrying papers and seals to safety. Many whisper that the revolution is nearly lost. Loyalists in New Jersey welcome British patrols, believing the rebellion soon to collapse. In towns and farms, families weigh their loyalties carefully, hoping to avoid punishment from whichever side prevails. The glow of July has faded. The promise of independence seems fragile, uncertain, and perhaps doomed. Still, in the quiet of winter nights, Washington thinks carefully. He knows that the cause cannot be preserved by retreat alone. Morale must be restored. The people must see hope. Plans begin to form in his mind, bold and risky, to strike back even when the odds seem against him. For now, though, the army rests on the western bank of the Delaware, campfires flickering against the snow, breath rising in the frozen air. The dark summer has passed into a darker autumn. Yet even in retreat, something has been gained. The Americans have faced the full weight of Britain's army and survived. They have learned the value of rivers, fog, and distance, the elements that guard them as much as muskets or cannon. They have learned to march long miles, to endure hunger, to rebuild after loss. And they have learned that leadership, calm and steady, can hold them together even when all else seems broken. Tonight, picture the East River under fog, boats gliding silently from shore to shore. Picture the fields of Long Island, where men once fought and fell beneath late summer sun. Picture the Hudson cross in haste, the Delaware freezing in December winds, the footprints of weary soldiers fading into snow. The season is dark, the hope dim, yet the flame of the cause still glows. The revolution survives not through victory, but through endurance. And that endurance will carry it into another year. The year ends in silence and cold. By December 1776, the American cause appears close to breaking. Washington's army, worn down by defeat and retreat, numbers only a few thousand. Men are barefoot, their clothes ragged, their spirits low. Across the Delaware River in New Jersey, British and German forces hold posts in towns, believing the rebellion nearly crushed. Yet in the deep chill of winter, courage begins to stir, quiet but determined. Washington knows that survival is not enough. A bold stroke is needed to revive the cause. He studies the map carefully. Trenton, a small town on the New Jersey side of the river, held by Hessian troops. If struck by surprise, the post might fall. If successful, the blow could restore confidence to an army and a people. The plan is dangerous, but the moment demands it. On Christmas night, December 25th, 1776, the march begins. Snow falls, mingling with icy rain. The Delaware River, dark and wide, carries chunks of drifting ice. Boats are gathered, Durham boats, sturdy and long. Soldiers climb aboard, muskets in hand. Horses led carefully onto barges, cannon lashed to rafts. Oarsmen strain against the current. The river groans with ice, but the boats push forward. Lanterns glow faintly, muffled under cloaks. The only sound is the splash of water and the low commands of officers. Hours pass. At last, near dawn, the army reaches the far shore. Men climb out, stamping their frozen feet, pulling coats tighter around their shoulders. The march to Trenton begins. Snow muffles their footsteps, the road winding through dark woods. The men are exhausted, yet they press on, urged forward by the promise of action after months of retreat. Their breath clouds the air, their muskets glisten with frost. As the town comes into view, the surprise is complete. The Hessians, weary from holiday celebrations, are unprepared for attack. Washington's men move swiftly through the streets, cannon firing, muskets cracking. The fighting is brief but decisive. Hundreds of Hessians surrender. Only a few escape. When the smoke clears, Trenton is in American hands. For the first time in months, the army holds a clear victory. Cheers rise, hats are thrown in the air, and hope, nearly lost, returns. News of Trenton spreads quickly. In taverns and farmhouses, in Congress and in distant camps, the story is told with pride. The cause is not broken. The struggle continues. Yet Washington knows that one victory cannot sustain all. He moves swiftly, determined to strike again before the enemy recovers. Days later, on January 3rd, 1777, the army faces the British at Princeton. The battle is harder, more confused. Soldiers clash in fields and orchards, lines wavering under fire. For a moment, American troops begin to break, retreating under pressure. But Washington rides forward, rallying them. Calm in the midst of musket fire, he steadies the lines. The men turn, advance, and drive the British back. The victory is theirs. Princeton is small compared to great battles of history, yet its meaning is vast. The army has not only survived the dark retreat, but has struck 2 blows in succession. The British are forced to pull back, concentrating their forces near New York. New Jersey, once lost, is partly regained, and the people, watching from farms and villages, see that the cause still lives. Through that winter, the army camps in Morristown. Snow lies thick on the ground. Winds whistle through bare trees. Tents sag under frost. Fires burn low. Food is scarce. Yet the men endure. Campfires glow at night, small circles of warmth against the cold. Around them, soldiers share stories, mend shoes, and wait for spring. The victories at Trenton and Princeton give them strength to endure, even as hunger gnaws and sickness spreads. For Washington, the lesson is clear. The revolution will not be won in a single grand battle, but in persistence. Narrow escapes, bold strikes, patient endurance. These are the threads from which victory may be woven. Each night march, each frozen crossing, each fire kept alive in the snow becomes part of the larger struggle. Tonight, imagine that river, black and icy under a winter sky. Picture boats creaking with weight, soldiers huddled close, oars cutting silently through drifting ice. Picture the snow-softened road, lined with weary men, their footsteps lost in white silence. Picture the sudden clash in Trenton streets, the surrender of Hessians, the cheers of men who believed hope was gone. Then picture the fields of Princeton, where calm resolve steadied wavering lines. The winter of 1776 to 1777 is remembered not for warmth or ease, but for courage. In the coldest season, with the cause nearly extinguished, the flame is kept alive. And from that small flame will grow the fire of a nation still struggling to be born. The year is 1777. The Revolution has survived its darkest winter. Fires at Trenton and Princeton gave new life to the cause, but the war is far from won. Britain, determined to end the rebellion, plans a campaign to cut the colonies in two. The plan is bold. An army under General John Burgoyne will march south from Canada along the line of the Hudson River, meeting British forces coming north from New York City. If successful, New England will be severed from the rest. The rebellion starved of strength. Burgoyne begins his march in June. His army is large and proud. British regulars in redcoats, German auxiliaries, loyalists, and indigenous allies. Along with them come wagons of supplies, cannon, and even carriages of officers' families. The line stretches for miles through forest and swamp. The pace is slow, the wilderness pressing close on every side. Axes must clear trees, bridges must be built, roads repaired. What looks swift on a map becomes heavy and grinding in reality. The Americans, under General Horatio Gates and other commanders, do not wait idly. Local militias rise from farms and villages, striking supply trains, felling trees to block roads, ambushing patrols. General Benedict Arnold, still a patriot in these days, shows daring in leading men against the enemy. In the forests of upstate New York, every path is watched, every crossing contested. Burgoyne's advance slows to a crawl. Food grows short, horses weaken, and morale falters. By September, the two armies face each other near Saratoga, along the Hudson River. The first clash comes at Freeman's Farm. The British push forward, but the Americans resist stubbornly, firing from behind fences and trees. The fields fill with smoke, the air heavy with powder. Though the British hold the ground, their losses are heavy. Weeks later, in October, they meet again at Bemis Heights. This time, the Americans press harder. Gates commands the line. Arnold rides fiercely among the men, urging them forward. Cannon roar, muskets flash, and at last the British are forced back, their lines breaking. Burgoyne, surrounded and cut off from reinforcements, sees no escape. On October 17, 1777, he surrenders his entire army to Gates. Nearly 6,000 troops laid down their arms. It is the first great victory for the American cause, a turning of the tide. News spreads like fire. In farmhouses and taverns, in churches and courthouses, people cheer with relief. After years of retreat and narrow survival, the Revolution has shown it can win a major battle. The importance of Saratoga reaches beyond the battlefield. For months, American envoys in Europe have sought allies. In Paris, Benjamin Franklin, charming, witty, and wise, meets with French ministers. They listen politely, but they want proof. France has long been Britain's rival, eager for revenge after the loss of Canada, but they will not risk open war for a lost cause. When word of Saratoga arrives, the proof is clear. The colonies can stand. The rebellion may succeed. In February 1778, France signs treaties of alliance and recognition. Ships will sail, troops will come, money will flow. For the first time, the struggle is not just between Britain and its colonies, but part of a wider conflict. The map of war widens to include oceans, islands, and distant ports. The alliance changes everything. British leaders know that France's entry means a global war. Navies will clash in the Caribbean, in the Mediterranean, and across the Atlantic. Britain must now defend far-flung colonies, protect trade routes, and guard against invasion at home. The American struggle, once a provincial rebellion, is now part of a world contest. For the Americans, the news brings hope, but also new challenges. French aid takes time to arrive. Supplies must be coordinated, strategies agreed upon, egos balanced. Washington and his men still face hardship, yet the knowledge that a powerful ally has joined their side gives fresh endurance. Soldiers march with a little more pride. Families sacrifice with a little more faith. Congress debates with a little more confidence. As 1778 unfolds, the war enters a new phase. The British shift strategy, moving focus to the south, hoping for loyalist support. The Americans prepare for longer conflict, knowing it may stretch on for years. Yet the memory of Saratoga remains strong. It is proof that perseverance, patience, and courage can bring more than survival. They can bring victory. Tonight, picture the quiet surrender at Saratoga. Rows of weary soldiers laying down muskets, flags furled, drums silent. Picture the American lines, tired but proud, watching as the enemy passes into captivity. Then picture Franklin in Paris, dressed in plain brown cloth, his spectacles low on his nose, smiling gently as ministers at last treat him not as a supplicant, but as a representative of a nation. The tide has begun to turn. What was once a narrow struggle on lonely fields now spreads across oceans. The revolution is no longer isolated. It is part of a larger storm, one that will shape empires as well as colonies. The war is far from over, but the promise has grown stronger. The flame lit at Lexington, carried through Trenton and Princeton, now burns brighter at Saratoga, and France has seen its light. The year is 1777. The Revolution has survived its darkest winter. Fires at Trenton and Princeton gave new life to the cause, but the war is far from won. Britain, determined to end the rebellion, plans a campaign to cut the colonies in two. The plan is bold. An army under General John Burgoyne will march south from Canada along the line of the Hudson River, meeting British forces coming north from New York City. If successful, New England would be severed from the rest. The rebellion starved of strength. Burgoyne begins his march in June. His army is large and proud. British regulars in redcoats, German auxiliaries, loyalists, and indigenous allies. Along with them come wagons of supplies, cannon, and even carriages of officers' families. The line stretches for miles through forest and swamp. The pace is slow, the wilderness pressing close on every side. Axes must clear trees, bridges must be built, roads repaired. What looks swift on a map becomes heavy and grinding in reality. The Americans, under General Horatio Gates and other commanders, do not wait idly. Local militias rise from farms and villages, striking supply trains, felling trees to block roads, ambushing patrols. General Benedict Arnold, still a patriot in these days, shows daring in leading men against the enemy. In the forests of upstate New York, every path is watched, every crossing contested. Burgoyne's advance slows to a crawl. Food grows short, horses weaken, and morale falters. By September, the two armies face each other near Saratoga, along the Hudson River. The first clash comes at Freeman's Farm. The British push forward, but the Americans resist stubbornly, firing from behind fences and trees. The fields fill with smoke, the air heavy with powder. Though the British hold the ground, their losses are heavy. Weeks later, in October, they meet again at Bemis Heights. This time, the Americans press harder. Gates commands a line. Arnold rides fiercely among the men, urging them forward. Cannon roar, muskets flash, and at last the British are forced back, their lines breaking. Burgoyne, surrounded and cut off from reinforcements, sees no escape. On October 17, 1777, he surrenders his entire army to Gates. Nearly 6,000 troops laid down their arms. It is the first great victory for the American cause, a turning of the tide. News spreads like fire. In farmhouses and taverns, in churches and courthouses, people cheer with relief. After years of retreat and narrow survival, the Revolution has shown it can win a major battle. The importance of Saratoga reaches beyond the battlefield. For months, American envoys in Europe have sought allies. In Paris, Benjamin Franklin, charming, witty, and wise, meets with French ministers. They listen politely, but they want proof. France has long been Britain's rival, eager for revenge after the loss of Canada, but they will not risk open war for a lost cause. When word of Saratoga arrives, the proof is clear. The colonies can stand. The rebellion may succeed. In February 1778, France signs treaties of alliance and recognition. Ships will sail, troops will come, money will flow. For the first time, the struggle is not just between Britain and its colonies, but part of a wider conflict. The map of war widens to include oceans, islands, and distant ports. The alliance changes everything. British leaders know that France's entry means a global war. Navies will clash in the Caribbean, in the Mediterranean, and across the Atlantic. Britain must now defend far-flung colonies, protect trade routes, and guard against invasion at home. The American struggle, once a provincial rebellion, is now part of a world contest. For the Americans, the news brings hope but also new challenges. French aid takes time to arrive. Supplies must be coordinated, strategies agreed upon, egos balanced. Washington and his men still face hardship, yet the knowledge that a powerful ally has joined their side gives fresh endurance. Soldiers march with a little more pride. Families sacrifice with a little more faith. Congress debates with a little more confidence. As 1778 unfolds, the war enters a new phase. The British shift strategy, moving focus to the south, hoping for loyalist support. The Americans prepare for longer conflict, knowing it may stretch on for years. Yet the memory of Saratoga remains strong. It is proof that perseverance, patience, and courage can bring more than survival. They can bring victory. Tonight, picture the quiet surrender at Saratoga. Rows of weary soldiers laying down muskets, flags furled, drums silent. Picture the American lines, tired but proud, watching as the enemy passes into captivity. Then picture Franklin in Paris, dressed in plain brown cloth, his spectacles low on his nose, smiling gently as ministers at last treat him not as a supplicant, but as a representative of a nation. The tide has begun to turn. What was once a narrow struggle on lonely fields now spreads across oceans. The revolution is no longer isolated. It is part of a larger storm, one that will shape empires as well as colonies. The war is far from over, but the promise has grown stronger. The flame lit at Lexington, carried through Trenton and Princeton, now burns brighter at Saratoga, and France has seen its light. The victory at Saratoga brings new hope, yet hope alone cannot feed or clothe an army. As winter approaches, Washington leads his men to a place called Valley Forge, 20 miles from Philadelphia. The British occupy the city, warm in houses, supplied by ships on the Delaware. The Americans take shelter in the woods, in a valley cut by a cold creek, where they will endure a season unlike any other. The march to Valley Forge begins in December 1777. Snow falls, soft and steady, covering fields and fences. Soldiers leave footprints dark against the white. Many lack shoes. Rags wrap their feet, leaving bloody marks in the snow. Their coats are thin, their faces gaunt from hunger. Wagons creak with supplies, yet never enough. Still, The army arrives, tired but obedient, and begins the slow work of survival. Huts are built first. Trees fall under the swing of axes, logs notched and stacked, roofs covered with mud and straw. Smoke rises from chimneys, thin and gray against the pale sky. Within each hut, a dozen men crowd together, lying on straw mats, wrapped in thin blankets. Fires burn low. Sparks drift upward through cracks in the roof. Outside, winds whistle through bare branches, and the ground hardens like iron. Food is scarce. Supply lines stretch too far. Wagons break, and corruption steals what little should arrive. Soldiers eat fire cakes, simple mixtures of flour and water cooked on stones. Meat is rare, vegetables rarer. Some boil leather for broth. Illness spreads. Typhus, dysentery, smallpox. Men cough in the night, fevered and weak. Graves appear on the edge of camp, mounds marked with simple wooden crosses. Yet through the suffering, the army endures. Washington rides among huts, his cloak pulled tight, his face set in calm resolve. He speaks with officers, comforts the sick, and listens to grievances. His presence, steady and unshaken, becomes a pillar for men who might otherwise despair. Letters from Congress bring little aid, but the sight of their commander gives them strength. It is in this winter hardship that a transformation begins. In February 1778, a Prussian officer named Baron Friedrich von Steuben arrives. He is stout, energetic, and full of sharp discipline. At first, the men laugh at his broken English, but soon they understand the seriousness of his work. Von Steuben begins with a small company, teaching them drills, how to march in step, how to handle muskets with precision, how to move as one body. Day after day, in snow and mud, he trains them. Once the first company learns, they train others, and the lessons spread across camp. The drills are simple yet profound. Soldiers learn to load faster, to wheel in formation, to hold lines under pressure. Officers learn to give clear orders, to keep rank steady. Slowly, what had been a gathering of volunteers begins to look like a true army. Muskets rise together. Feet move in unison. Commands are followed without confusion. Von Steuben also brings order beyond the drill field. He introduces sanitation, camp routines, and rules for discipline. Latrines are dug properly, huts arranged neatly, kitchens organized. Illness lessens, spirits lift. In time, the men no longer stumble like weary farmers. They march with the bearing of soldiers. What winter sought to break, training begins to forge anew. Meanwhile, news reaches camp that France has joined the war. Cheers echo through the huts. Hats are thrown in the air. Though supplies remain short, the knowledge that allies will send ships and men strengthens resolve. The winter that began in despair slowly shifts toward endurance. By spring, the army at Valley Forge is changed. Still thin, still scarred by hunger and illness, but different, stronger, steadier. When they march out in June 1778, they are no longer the raw volunteers of Trenton or Princeton. They are soldiers capable of meeting the British in open battle. The transformation is quiet, invisible to those beyond the camp, but it is one of the most important turns in the entire struggle. Valley Forge becomes a symbol not of defeat, but of perseverance. The graves remind all of sacrifice. The huts remind of endurance. The drills remind of discipline. From the suffering of that winter comes the strength of the next campaigns. Tonight, picture the camp under snow. Rows of huts smoke faintly against a gray sky. Men gather around small fires, hands stretched toward warmth. Beyond, a parade ground echoes with the steady sound of muskets drilled in unison, the sharp voice of von Steuben cutting through the cold air. Washington rides past, his horse stamping in frost, his cloak heavy on his shoulders. The army waits, endures, and transforms. The winter school of Valley Forge is not one of books or letters, but a hardship and discipline. And from its lessons, a new army will rise, an army ready for the long road still ahead. The war grows wider after Valley Forge. With France as an ally, The struggle is no longer confined to New England or the Middle Colonies. Oceans become battlefields, ports become prizes, and the South becomes Britain's new focus. The conflict spreads across farms, rivers, forests, and seas, touching lives in every corner of America. In 1778, British leaders shift their attention to the southern colonies. They believe that strong loyalist support lies there, planters, merchants, and officials who still favor crown. If the South can be regained, they hope the rebellion may collapse. That winter, British troops sail south and capture Savannah, Georgia. The city falls quickly, and the region becomes a foothold for further campaigns. 2 years later, in 1780, Charleston, South Carolina, is besieged. British ships block the harbor, cannon pound the defenses. After weeks of resistance, the city surrenders. Thousands of American soldiers are captured in one of the worst defeats of the war. For Britain, it seems a major success. Red-coated troops march confidently through the streets, and officers believe the tide has turned in their favor. But the South proves harder control than maps suggest. Beyond cities and ports, the countryside brims with partisans, small bands of fighters who know the swamps, forests, and back roads. They strike quickly and vanish, denying the British secure control. Francis Marion, known as the Swamp Fox, leads such bands, appearing suddenly to ambush supply trains before disappearing into wetlands. Others, like Thomas Sumner and Andrew Pickens, wage similar campaigns. Their actions may be small compared to great battles, but they wear down the enemy day by day. In January 1781, a larger clash takes place at Cowpens in South Carolina. American forces under General Daniel Morgan face British troops led by Banastre Tarleton. Morgan arranges his men carefully. Riflemen in front, militia in the second line, and Continentals behind. The plan works. After an initial retreat, the Americans turn and strike hard, surrounding the British. It is a clear victory, boosting morale and showing that strategy and patience can overcome numbers. Meanwhile, General Nathanael Greene, sent south by Washington, takes command of the Continental Army there. Greene understands that outright victory is less important than survival. He divides his forces, forcing the British to chase him across long distances. His motto becomes clear: we fight, get beat, rise, and fight again. Though often retreating, Greene's campaigns exhaust his opponents, slowly bleeding British strength. Beyond the battlefields of the South, the war touches other lives in deep ways. For enslaved people, promises of freedom are offered by both sides. The British proclaim liberty to those who flee rebel masters and join the crown. Thousands take the chance, escaping plantations to serve as soldiers, laborers, or sailors. Some find new lives, though many later face betrayal when promises go unkept. On the American side, the issue of slavery remains unresolved, though individuals petition for freedom and states in the North begin gradual steps toward abolition. The war, though fought for liberty, reveals contradictions that cannot yet be solved. Indigenous nations also find themselves drawn into the conflict. Some align with the British, seeking to protect their lands from colonial expansion. Others ally with the Americans, hoping for security in a new nation. For many, the war brings devastation, villages burned, crops destroyed, families displaced. Their struggles are quieter in the record, but no less real, a reminder that the revolution reshaped lives beyond the armies marching under banners. At sea, the conflict spreads further still. French ships sail across the Atlantic, challenging Britain's dominance. Naval battles erupt in the Caribbean, where Sugar Island are prizes as valuable as cities on the mainland. American privateers, privately owned ships licensed to raid, harass British commerce, capturing vessels and disrupting trade. For Britain, the war becomes not only costly but global, stretching resources then across oceans. The Chesapeake, the Carolinas, the Caribbean, the Atlantic, everywhere the struggle expands, like ripples widening from a stone dropped in water. Each battle may be small, but together they shift the balance. Britain finds itself fighting not only rebels in America, but also French fleets, Spanish garrisons, and later even Dutch traders turned hostile. What began as a colonial revolt becomes a contest of empires. By 1781, the Southern Campaign has drained British strength. They win battles, yet they fail to pacify the countryside. For every town captured, another road becomes unsafe. For every regiment station, a partisan band rises nearby. Greene, though often retreating, achieves his goal. The British are stretched thin, their confidence dimmed. Through it all, ordinary soldiers endure endless marches, scarce food, and constant uncertainty. Farmers see crops trampled, barns burned, fences broken. Families live in fear of raids by both armies, caught between loyalties. The war in the South is less about grand parades and more about endurance. Dusty roads, silent ambushes, long chases across fields, and endless small struggles that add up to something larger. Tonight, picture the quiet swamps where Marion's men hide, fireflies glowing above still water. Picture the fields of Cowpens, where lines of militia turn at the right moment to encircle their pursuers. Picture Greene's army retreating across Carolina roads, weary yet unbroken, rising again to fight another day. Picture ships on the Caribbean Sea, sails full of wind, cannon booming over waves, as the war spreads far beyond the horizon. The revolution has widened, no longer confined to New England skirmishes or northern sieges. It now spans forests, rivers, oceans, and empires. It touches enslaved people seeking freedom, indigenous nations struggling for survival, merchants watching ships sail into danger. It is everywhere, carried by endurance and by hope. And though the war is not yet won, the balance has shifted. Britain faces not a scattered rebellion, but a continental struggle, supported by powerful allies. The map of the conflict stretches wider with each season. From the swamps of the south to the waves of the Atlantic, the revolution endures, broader, deeper, and harder to contain. The war has stretched long. By 1781, years of marching, hunger, and hardship weigh on both armies. Britain still holds New York City and strong posts in the South, but its grasp weakens. The Americans endure, steadied by Washington and strengthened by French alliance. The question remains, where will the final stroke fall? That summer, the threads of war begin to weave together, drawing all eyes to a quiet town on the Virginia coast, Yorktown. General Charles Cornwallis commands the British Army in the South. After months of pursuit and skirmish, he moves north to Virginia, seeking a defensible position with naval support nearby. He chooses Yorktown, a small port on the Chesapeake Bay. There, on a narrow peninsula between the York River and the James, he builds fortifications. Earthworks rise, cannon face outward, and redoubts guard the approaches. With the Royal Navy expected to secure the bay, the position seems strong. Washington, encamped near New York, watches carefully. For years he has dreamed of striking that city, but British strength there is too great. Now word arrives. Cornwallis has gone to Virginia. At the same time, French forces under General Rochambeau march north to join him. Together, they see a new possibility. If they move swiftly south, and if the French fleet can control the Chesapeake, they might trap Cornwallis. The plan is bold, and it requires perfect cooperation. In August, French Admiral de Grasse sails in the Caribbean with a fleet of warships. His destination is the Chesapeake Bay. When the British Navy arrives to challenge him, cannon thunder over the waves in the Battle of the Capes. After hours of maneuver and fire, the British withdraw. The bay is secured. Cornwallis, waiting at Yorktown, will find no escape by sea. Meanwhile, Washington and Rochambeau set their armies in motion. To deceive the British in New York, they spread rumors of an attack there. Then, with quiet speed, they march south. Columns of men cross rivers, tramp dusty roads, and pass through towns, their boots beating a steady rhythm. By late September, they arrive in Virginia. Along with local militia and French troops under the Marquis de Lafayette, they surround Yorktown. The net is ready to be drawn. The siege begins on September 28th. Rather than a dramatic charge, it is a work of patience. Soldiers dig trenches under cover of darkness, shovels striking earth, the sound muffled in the night. Cannon are rolled into place, gabions stacked. fascines laid. By dawn, new lines appear closer to the enemy walls. The process repeats night after night, the circle tightening. Cornwallis's men watch anxiously from behind their fortifications, their supplies dwindling. On October 9th, the bombardment begins. American and French guns fire steadily, day and night. Cannonballs arc through the sky. Shells burst over the town. Buildings catch fire. The noise is constant, but within the trenches, men work calmly, passing powder, swabbing barrels, aiming carefully. Washington himself fires the first gun, his shots sailing toward the enemy lines. For days, the bombardment continues, unbroken, wearing down the defenders. Key redoubts, small outworks protecting the main fort, must be taken. On the night of October 14th, assaults are launched. Americans under Alexander Hamilton storm one, French troops another. The fighting is brief but fierce, carried out under moonlight and musket fire. Within hours, both positions fall. The siege lines move still closer, and Cornwallis's situation grows desperate. Inside Yorktown, conditions worsen. Horses are slaughtered for food, wells run low, men grow weary under unending bombardment. Attempt to break out fail. Messages for help go unanswered. The Royal Navy, beaten back at the Chesapeake, cannot reach them. Surrounded by land and sea, the British Army has no path of escape. On October 17th, white flags appear. Cornwallis opens negotiations for surrender. 2 days later, in a meadow outside town, formal ceremonies take place. British troops march out, their drums beating a slow tune. Muskets are stacked, flags lowered. American and French soldiers stand in long rows, silent witnesses to the moment. Cornwallis himself does not appear, sending his second-in-command, General O'Hara, to yield the sword. Washington, maintaining dignity, directs the surrender through General Benjamin Lincoln. The exchange is brief, without triumphal shouting, only solemn recognition that the struggle has turned. For the Americans, the victory at Yorktown is profound. Years of retreat, hunger, and uncertainty now end in a captured British army. Nearly 8,000 men. For the French, it is proof that their alliance was well placed, their fleet and soldiers vital to success. For Britain, it is a heavy blow, convincing many that the war cannot be won. Yet even here, the tone is quiet. There is no great battle cry, no sudden ending. Rather, patience, cooperation, and endurance have prevailed. Siege lines drawn silently in the night, cannon fire with steady rhythm, trenches dug by hand. These have brought the war to its turning point. In the weeks that follow, the armies remain in camp. Messages cross the ocean to London and Paris, carrying news of surrender. In Britain, debates flare in Parliament, voices rising for peace. In America, towns celebrate with bells and bonfires. Yet Washington cautions that the war is not truly finished until treaties are signed. He remains at his post, steady as ever, guiding his men to the waiting months ahead. Tonight, picture the scene at Yorktown. The Chesapeake waters lie calm, French ships at anchor. The fields are lined with trenches, their paths cut neatly toward the town. The guns are silent now, their barrels cooling under autumn sun. Soldiers stand at ease, watching as their foes march out slowly, stacking arms in quiet surrender. No wild cheers, only the rustle of uniforms and the steady beat of drums fading into silence. The net is tightened. The trap is closed, and the long struggle moves toward its end. From patience and cooperation, from steady endurance and quiet labor, a victory has come, one that will echo far beyond Virginia Field, shaping the birth of a new nation. The surrender at Yorktown in 1781 does not end the war at once. Britain still holds New York City, Charleston, and other strong posts. The armies remain in camp, watching one another, waiting for word from across the ocean. Months pass, then years, before the final peace is reached. Yet, in that waiting time, the end slowly takes shape. In 1782, negotiations begin in Paris. American envoys, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and John Jay, meet with British representatives in quiet rooms. Maps are spread across tables, quills scratch on parchment, and every word is weighed with care. The talks move slowly, but gradually, terms are set. Britain will recognize the independence of the United States. Boundaries will stretch from the Atlantic to the Mississippi, from Canada to Florida. Fishing rights, debts, and loyalist claims are all debated, but the essential truth remains. The colonies are no longer colonies. On September 3rd, 1783, the Treaty of Paris is signed. Bells ring across the new nation. Cannons fire in salute, and churches hold services of thanksgiving. In farmhouses and towns, people speak the word peace with relief. After 8 long years, the fighting is over. For the soldiers, however, the transition is not simple. The Continental Army, hardened by years of marches and battles, must now disband. In Newburgh, New York, discontent stirs, unpaid wages, uncertain futures, broken promises. Washington addresses his officers, his voice calm but firm. He reminds them of their sacrifice, appeals to their honor, and asks them to trust that the new republic will fulfill its debts. His words quiet the unrest. One by one, regiments lay down arms, and the long war is truly over. Washington himself, in December 1783, resigns his commission before Congress in Annapolis. He stands tall in his simple uniform, bows, and declares he is returning to private life. The act astonishes Europe. In a world used to generals turning into rulers, Washington chooses to give up power. For Americans, it becomes a model of what leadership can mean, service rather than ambition. Peace, however, brings new challenges. The states are free, but they are loosely bound under the Articles of Confederation. Congress struggles to collect taxes, regulate trade, and manage debts. Local disputes flare. Farmers protest high taxes. Merchants demand order. The fragile experiment of self-government faces its first real test. Can 13 independent states act together as one nation? The answer comes slowly, shaped by debate and compromise. In 1787, delegates gather once more in Philadelphia. This time, they are not writing a declaration, but framing a constitution. In Independence Hall, under the same high windows where Jefferson once drafted Word of Liberty, they design a new system of government. Balances of power, checks, and shared responsibilities. It is not perfect, but lays a foundation for a republic that will endure. Yet even as a new nation is built, questions remain. Who is included in the promise of liberty, and who is left out? Women who kept farms, raised families, and endured loss during the war do not gain political voice. Enslaved people, whose labor underpinned the economy, remain in chains, their freedom deferred. Indigenous nations, whose land stretched across the continent, find treaties broken and futures uncertain. The revolution, for all its ideals, does not fulfill all its promises. Still, seeds are planted, ideas of equality, petitions for freedom, movements for change, that will grow in years to come. The new republic takes its first steps cautiously. A president is chosen, and Washington, called from retirement, accepts once more. He walks to his inauguration not as a general, but as a servant of the people. Congress meets, laws are passed, the Constitution tested. Across the Atlantic, kings and ministers watch in disbelief as a new form of government, born from revolution, begins to function. For ordinary people, life resumes. Fields are plowed, ships sail, markets bustle. Families rebuild homes burned in war. Churches repair steeples shattered by cannon. Towns reopen schools. The great events of history settle back into daily rhythms. Births, marriages, harvests, prayers. Yet beneath those ordinary days lies a memory of what was endured. Long marches through snow, nights in crowded huts, rivers crossed under fog, words read aloud on courthouse steps. Those memories give weight to the promises of a new nation. The revolution, in the end, is not only about battles won or treaties signed. It is about endurance, cooperation, and the quiet belief that people can govern themselves. It is about promises kept in part, and promises still waiting to be fulfilled. It is about a vision larger than the present moment, a vision that liberty and justice, though imperfectly carried out, can grow across generations. Tonight, picture the Treaty of Paris on a wooden table in a Parisian room. Picture Washington bowing before Congress, laying down his sword. Picture farmers sowing seed in newly freed soil, children learning to read by candlelight. families rebuilding fences along quiet fields. Picture also the questions left unanswered, voices still waiting to be heard, promises yet to be completed. The revolution is over, but its work continues. It is not a sudden blaze, but a long, quiet fire carried forward year by year. Its victories were not only in muskets and cannon, but in patience, endurance, and a steady pursuit of a new idea that a people, through struggle and sacrifice, might govern themselves. As we close this story, let the noise of battle fade, the drums fall silent, and the campfires dim. The past grows quiet once more. A continent that once stirred with sparks now rests under stars. The revolution, born of endurance, leaves behind a promise, one still unfolding, one still to keep. And in that promise, softly spoken, a nation begins to dream.